As the party set forth out of the eastern gate, the company was silent, wanting to be as far away from what they had just done as quickly as possible. Some due to shame, others due to not wanting to be caught for their actions. Dane led the way out of town, following the tracks with which they decided to follow. But due to the passing of time since the tracks had been left and the additional time wasted by the party, the tracks had been disturbed by a number of the locals heading out of town into the great forest ahead. Just before the party reached the apparent gloomy forest, as the path wound down towards the river, Hellman noticed one of the locals from the tavern the previous night and decided to ask where the road they were following led to. "This road, you say?" acknowledged the local. "Well, I don't honestly know where it leads. I followed about a quarter of a mile to the mill I work in, and truth be told, that's as far as I've been in my entire life. I was told as a wee child, though, that I should never go into the depths of the forest, as it's a dangerous place." With that, the party thanked the stranger for his limited usefulness and headed on their way. The party travelled in a small column with Dane and Henrik at the front, followed by Bjorn and Melkor at the rear of the party in case there had been an ambush planned for them. But the road was remarkably quiet. For nearly 3 hours the party followed the track into the forest, the road banking left, then right, then left again, the tracks that had been left behind becoming steadily harder to see as the path's dirt track becomes harder and less dust left behind. After another 2 hours of travel, the group had learned a lot about each other. Using this time to bond as the forest had been no threat to them, they had found out about the barbarian wars from Melkor and Henrik, how Bjorn had been cast into exile, how Alegna had lost her family, how Rave was searching for a lost friend, how Dane's brother just disappeared one day, and how Hellman was trying to earn enough gold to find the greatest recipes in the land to open his tavern, which they had all agreed would make a great place to call home one day. The sun was lowering into the west. As it was hovering over the river, the sun glistened on the water's surface. It was then, as the party was gazing out while trudging along, a glint of silver caught the eyes of Dane. For just up ahead, resting on a boulder to the side of the river, was what appeared to be an elf. It didn't appear to just be any elf though, as the chainmail armour upon her chest and bow upon her back made her look menacing. Luckily for the party, the elf appeared to not have noticed them, gazing off into the opposite direction. The party, however, decided that caution should be given and decided that Riv, being the smallest, would walk up to the elf and ask if she had seen the card they had been following. Henrik decided to follow behind Riv just in case she needed some support. As they approached, the elf jumped in surprise, fear upon her face. "Hi!" shouted Riv as she just stood there and stared at the elf, not saying another word, just standing and staring. Looking angry that she'd been stuck upon, the elf said, "Who do you think you are, sneaking up on me?" "Sorry about that," Henrik said as Riv continued to just stare at the elf. "It's fine. Welcome to the town road," replied the scout. "Before I can allow you to go any further, you must pay the Lord's road toll." "What the hell is the Lord's road toll?" demanded Henrik. Rolling her eyes, the elf replied, "The Lord's road toll, obviously. The tax you must pay to be on this road. God, you obviously are not from around here." "No, we are not from around here," Henrik retorted before gesturing to the others to move up. "We are in search of the missing barbarians who have been going and missing in these lands. One of our company was taken only last night and we in haste to find them. What can you tell us about this?" "What can I tell you?" retorted the elf. "I can tell you that you are on the town road and you must pay the toll that is due for passing this way. It is what the Lord demands." "And who is the Lord of which you speak?" inquired Melkor as the rest of the party joined the conversation. "Our Lord is Lord Copperweight," replied the elf. "These are his roads in which you walk, and it is to him the collected toll payments are paid." Henrik, slowly losing what little patience he had left at this point, demanded to know if the elf had seen any other barbarians pass this way, or if she had seen any in a cart which they knew had passed this way at some point this very day. "We don't get paid to check carts," replied the elf. "We get paid to collect a toll, and we get to keep 10% to ourselves." "We?" asked Halamine. "Yes, we," replied the elf. "You don't think I'd be out here by myself, did you?" At that, the elf blew on the whistle that had been wrapped around her long neck. From up ahead, 4 what appeared to be bandits crossed the breadth of the road. To the right of the party appeared another elf scout, and behind the 4 bandits appeared 2 more elf scouts. A clever little trap indeed. With this, Riv started to laugh. "Ah, clever little plan that was. So how much is this toll you wish us to pay?" "It will be 10 silver each," the elf replied. With that, Alegna decided it was a good idea to pay. She approached the 4 bandits who crossed the path and placed her 10 silver within the bucket. At this, she was allowed to continue up the road. Next came Hailman, who, though brave, was far from foolish and knew that a fight at this time was not a good idea. He too pays his 10 silver, accompanied by Dane. Then came Riv, who had a little twinkle in her eye, and as she placed her 10 silver in the bucket, with a sleight of hand removed a further 20 silver, doubling her profit on the exchange. A true little rogue. That left the 3 barbarians, Bjorn, Henrik and Melkor. All 3 approached the 4 bandits together, all looking menacing and angry at having to pay a toll to use a bloody road. Henrik went first. He paid his 10 silver and moved to the right. Melkor went next, paid his 10 silver and moved to the left. Lastly came Bjorn. Begrudgingly, he paid his 10 silver. He too passed through the bandits, but just as they thought they were all through, Bjorn withdrew his double-handed sword from his back and swung it at the neck of the closest bandit. With one swing, the head was flying down the road. At the same time, both Henrik and Melkor withdrew their great axes from their backs and in a rage swung at the closest bandits, who had now started to withdraw their swords. Melkor's blade sailed over the head of the one he was fighting as he himself dodged a sword parry. Both blows were able to be dodged. Henrik's axe, though, had been parried, the sword glancing his axe downwards and to the side, accidentally striking Bjorn in the leg. A scream of pain and rage erupted from Bjorn as he looked around for what had happened. At the same time, Riv withdrew her 2 daggers and jumped at the final bandit, aiming both daggers for the heart of the bandit and screaming the words, "Rage!" Believing herself to now be a barbarian. Her first blade was parried away with the bandit's sword, but the second finding a home deep in the bandit's shoulder, wounding him. Seeing all of this, Helman knew he still didn't want to fight. Not yet, at least. So he approached the elf scout nearest the river and attempted to cast Charm Person on her. "I do not wish to fight you. I've never seen such a beautiful elf before," he proclaimed to the elf. Behind Helman, Alegna scoffed at this, believing herself to indeed be the most beautiful of all elvenkind. However, in this instance, Helman failed to charm the elf, and she just laughed as she fired an arrow aimed at his heart. Luckily for Helman, he has all the agility of his people and was able to blunder out of the way of the arrow with such ease and grace. Dane, however, was not so lucky. 2 of the 3 remaining scouts had strung their bows and had taken aim at the dwarf ranger. Both arrows had flown true. The first struck Dane in his right shoulder, forcing him to his knees. The second piercing his stomach as he knelt there. Within less than a few seconds, Dane was out of the fight, unable to move due to the pain of both arrows protruding from him. The final elf scout and the first the party had encountered had strung her bow and fired it straight at Bjorn. The arrow flew true and collided between his shoulder blades on Bjorn's back. This only further enraged him though. Wounded twice, once by Henrik and now by an elf with a bow, Bjorn lifted his sword and swung it in a high arc. Unfortunately, the bandit ducked, and if Bjorn hadn't raised the sword at the last second, would have taken the head of Henrik with him. This threw Henrik off his balance and only just stopped himself falling to the ground. Enraged himself, he now moved to the side and swung his axe. His aim was true and he cleaved the bandit's arm off at the elbow. Laughing manically, he left his foe for Bjorn to finish off as he moved looking for a further kill. By now, Melkor too had become enraged. Not making a killing blow on the first swing had only gotten his heckles up. With that, he swung his trusty battle axe named Swing and a Miss, finally making contact with the bandit he was facing. His blow swinging in from the left and severed his opponent's leg at the knee. The bandit falling to the ground, the last thing he saw in this world was Swing and a Miss aimed straight between his eyes, before the darkness and death took him. Rave being the feastiest gnome of all time and believing herself to be the reincarnation of a barbarian king, took up her dagger, screamed, "In the name of my barbarian brethren!" before plunging the daggers into the bandit's throat. He dropped, gurgling to his knees as Riv, now drenched in blood, starts to cackle menacingly. Ha ha! It was at this point the fight looked to be going in favour of the party. 3 bandits now lay dead upon the ground, the 4th being heavily wounded, but they still left 4 deadly elf scouts able to fire multiple arrows at a time at our stalwart adventurers. Up until this point, Alegna had tried to keep out of the fighting, but knew she couldn't continue. With that, she cast Healing Word upon the fallen Dane, while simultaneously casting Moonbeam upon the closest scout who was running straight at her. Dane slowly rose to his feet and was able to parry a blow aimed at Alegna, thanking her for saving his life as he did so. All the while, Helman was still trying to charm the scout closest to him. This time he found himself on bended knee, offering his heart and requesting a hand in marriage. In response, he found an arrow firing at him. His charm must have worked to some degree though, as it only grazed his arm. His response was to shout, "'Tis but a flesh wound! Still, would you marry me?" Knowing this needed to be over quickly, Bjorn finished the downed bandit, his blade slicing him through the stomach, his entrails falling out of his body. With that, Bjorn was again on the move, moving to the scout to the east of the party, blade raised as he charged. At the same time, Henrik moved to join him. Though heavily wounded at this point, as a barbarian in a rage, he was not sure why his body wasn't moving as quickly as it normally would. Both Melkor and Riv rushed towards the scout that had fired their arrow at Dane, but before they could reach them, an arrow flew between them both, hitting the scout in the chest before falling back into the river. Behind, they could see a wounded Dane, a smile on his face for the revenge he had taken on the scout, who had only moments earlier thought she had killed the ranger. While Helman continued to try and charm his foe, and failing miserably, Alegna had withdrawn her dagger and charged the closest scout. As she approached, she jumped in the air like an approaching lion, landing upon her foe, forcing them to the ground flat on their back, her dagger protruding from the elven scout's chest. Slowly bleeding out, death came slowly. But death indeed did come. This left just two scouts, the first being charmed, or failing to be charmed by Helman, and the second being attacked by two fully raged barbarians. It didn't take long before Henrik's axe was slicing open the scout from the neck to the chest, as Bjorn swung Lawkiller, removing the head of the scout. This just left the final scout. By now, she knew it was over. She fell to her knees in tears, not wanting to marry Helman, and fearing for her life, she slumped against the rock next to the river and cried. The party surrounded her, angry at not only being charged a toll, but for the bandits and scouts daring to try and resist being killed. How dare they? Oh, and for injuring several party members, including and nearly killing Dane. "Right, elf, it's time to talk," Melkor demanded menacingly. "Tell us about your so-called lord." She knew she had nowhere to go and told them everything she knew. "Our lord is Copperweight. He lives several days' ride from here at his estate. He usually has anywhere from 12 to 15 guards, depending on how many are out collecting the tolls from the area, though now there are far fewer of us." She looked on, tears in her eyes. "We are supposed to collect the tolls and make those that ask too many questions go missing."
"What do you know of our missing brothers?"
bellowed Bjorn.
"I cannot say, for you will have to ask my lord," she replied.
Melkor had heard enough and swung his axe, but the elf was nimble and rolled herself off to the side, off the river, and started to float away. The full party released arrows, bolts and javelins at her and wounded her, but to what extent they do not know, as the current was so swift it pulled her away too quick to follow. With that, Alegna saw to the wounds of the party, starting with Dane, who needed to rest. Riv had helped herself to the silver that had been collected for the toll, sharing it equally between her fellow party members, her loyalty to those she cares about not letting her take the silver for herself. And with that, it was starting to get dark and the party needed to rest. They moved off the path into a clearing in the woods where they found what appeared to be an abandoned camp. So fellow adventurers, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to be made aware the next time we upload. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon.